My daughter-in-law smiled sweetly and said, "Mom, we're renovating, you'll have to leave for a while." I packed quietly. But when I came back a week later, the locks were changed and she said, "Actually, you're not coming back." I pulled out a document from my purse and her face went white. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax, let's begin. I placed the photograph of my husband, Antonio, face down on the bedspread. The glass in the frame was cool and smooth under my fingertips. From the living room, Vanessa's voice carried down the hall, a bright, chirping sound discussing wall textures. "We're thinking a matte finish for this room, Me. Much more modern. It will really open up the space." I did not answer. I lifted the photograph and slotted it between two of my sweaters in the open suitcase on my bed. The case was the large, hardshell one Antonio had bought for our trip to Florianopolis 20 years ago. The latch made a definitive click when I closed it. I heard her heels on the wooden floor approaching. She appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit, her hair perfectly straightened. She smiled, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "Almost done. I don't want to rush you." "I am nearly finished," I said. My voice sounded calm, which pleased me. "It's so exciting," she said, gliding into the room. She ran a hand over my dresser, the old walnut one Antonio's father had made. "This whole renovation, it's been a dream of mine for so long." Ricardo finally agreed it was time. "Time for what?" I asked, folding a nightgown. "To update Me, to bring this old house into the present. You'll see when you come back, it will be like a whole new place." She said it as if offering a gift. The proposal had been presented to me 3 days prior, over *Cafe Zinho in this same room. Vanessa had perched on the edge of the armchair, her posture perfect. Ricardo sat beside her, looking at his hands. "Me," Vanessa had begun, her tones sweetly concerned. "The house needs significant work. The wiring, the plumbing, it's a danger, truly. And the aesthetic is so dated. We want to invest in it to make it beautiful and safe for the future." I had sipped my coffee. The house was solid. Antonio and I had maintained it meticulously. "It will be a huge project," Vanessa continued. "Dust, noise, workers in and out all day. It's no environment for you. We thought, for your own comfort and peace, you could stay somewhere else for a little while." "For how long?" I had asked. Ricardo had spoken then, his voice soft. "Just for the renovation, Me. A few months, maybe." Vanessa had nodded vigorously. "Yes, and we'll take care of everything. You won't have to lift a finger. We've already found a lovely little apartment for you. It's all arranged." I had looked at my son. His eyes held a plea for ease, for no conflict. I remembered that look from when he was a boy, wanting to avoid a scolding. The habit of granting that peace was decades old, so I had nodded. "If you think it is best." Now, in my bedroom, that same habit held me. I placed the nightgown in the suitcase. "The apartment is ready." "Absolutely," Vanessa said. "Fully furnished. All you need are your personal things." She watched me pack my jewelry box, a small wooden inlaid piece. "You don't need to take everything, just what you'll need for a while." I took the box. I took my good silver brush and mirror set, a wedding gift. I took my files of family documents, stacked neatly in a leather portfolio. I packed my clothes, choosing the older, more worn items, leaving my best dresses hanging in the closet. A temporary measure requires temporary things. Vanessa's phone rang, and she turned away, speaking in low, quick tones about delivery schedules. I closed the suitcase and fastened the straps. The room looked strange with my personal items removed. It was just a room again, not my room. I wheeled the suitcase to the living room. Ricardo was there now, standing awkwardly by the sofa. He looked at the suitcase, then at me. "Me, let me get that." "I have it," I said. "Are you sure you have everything?" he asked. "For now." Vanessa ended her call. "The car is outside. I'll drive you, Me. Ricardo has a meeting." "I can take a taxi," I said. "Nonsense," she said, the smile back in place. She plucked the house key from my key ring on the entry table. "I'll keep this safe for you, for when you come back." The metal was warm from my pocket. I felt the weight of its absence from my ring. I nodded. We walked out to her car, a sleek silver vehicle. Ricardo put my suitcase in the trunk. He hugged me, a brief, tight embrace. "I'll come see you at the new place soon," he murmured into my hair. "Yes," I said. I got into the passenger seat. The car smelled of artificial lemon and new leather. Vanessa drove smoothly, chatting about paint samples and Italian tiles. I looked out the window at my street, the familiar jacaranda tree on the corner, Senora Martins watering her geraniums on her porch. She saw me and waved. I raised my hand in return. The apartment was in a modern building downtown, a tall box of glass and steel. The apartment itself was small, a single room with a kitchenette and a separate bathroom. The furniture was bland and new, the walls a stark white. It felt like a hotel room, impersonal and transient. Vanessa brought my suitcase inside. "See, it has everything, very efficient." "Yes," I said again. She lingered for a moment, as if waiting for thanks. When I offered none, she checked her watch. "I should get back. The contractor is coming at 3. You have my number if you need anything." "The keys?" I asked. She handed me a single silver key. "For the apartment. The building is secure." After she left, I stood in the center of the empty space. The silence here was different. It was a hollow silence, without the creaks and sighs of my house, without the distant hum of my refrigerator, the clock ticking in the hall. I opened my suitcase. I took out Antonio's photograph and placed it on the generic nightstand. It looked small and lost there. I walked to the window. The view was of another identical building. I thought of my garden, my rose bushes that would need watering. I had not asked Ricardo to water them. I had assumed I would be back in a few days to check on things, to collect the mail. The assumption now felt foolish. A cold clarity began to seep into the edges of my mind, cutting through the fog of reluctant compliance. The efficiency of it all was notable. The prepared apartment, the immediate taking of my key, the specific mention of taking only what I needed for a while. The way Ricardo would not meet my eyes. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed. I replayed the conversation from 3 days ago, stripping Vanessa's words of their sweet tone. The house was a danger. It needed updating. My comfort was the priority. The logic was smooth and self-contained, designed to be unassailable. A good daughter-in-law caring for her elderly family. But I knew the bones of my house. The wiring had been updated 5 years ago. The plumbing was sound. Antonio had seen to that. The dated aesthetic was the history of our life together, evident in every scuff on the floor, every mark on the wall where we had measured Ricardo's height. I opened the leather portfolio I had brought. Inside, among birth certificates and old passports, was a single document in a clear plastic sleeve. I did not need to take it out. I knew what it said. The name on the first line, the description of the property, the official stamps. I had placed it in the portfolio out of habit, a habit born of a lesson from Antonio. Always know where your papers are, Keisha. Always. I closed the portfolio. The hollow silence of the apartment pressed in. The unease I had dismissed as an old woman's resistance solidified into a hard, quiet certainty. This was not about renovation. The timeline was vague because it was indefinite. The apartment was not a temporary solution. It was intended as a permanent replacement. I looked at Antonio's photograph. His steady gaze, captured in black and white, seemed to hold a question. I had agreed to leave. I had handed over my key. I had packed my things and come to this white box. The first move was complete, and I had made it willingly, out of a tired desire for peace. But as I sat there, the cold clarity settled in my chest, a compact weight. They thought the house was theirs to redesign. They thought I was a piece of furniture to be moved to storage. They were wrong. I knew exactly what I owned. The game had begun with their deception. It would end with my document. For now, I would wait. I would let them think they had succeeded. Patience, I had learned over 66 years, is a form of power. I had nothing but time, and the truth was on my side, printed on official paper, waiting in a leather sleeve. I waited 1 week. It was a week of silence. My phone did not ring. Ricardo did not visit the efficient apartment. The silence was a confirmation of my growing certainty. I occupied myself with small routines. I walked to the nearby market each morning, buying only what I needed for that day. I cleaned the already clean surfaces. I read. I looked at Antonio's photograph. The waiting was not passive, it was a period of gathering resolve. On the 8th day, I decided to test the boundaries of a while. I did not call to announce my visit. Announcements allow for preparation, for staging. I wanted to see the reality. I packed the same suitcase. I placed the leather portfolio containing the document inside on top of my clothes. I dressed in one of my better dresses, a simple blue linen one. I took a taxi across the city. The journey felt longer than it had the week before. The familiar streets seemed to watch me pass. The taxi stopped at the curb in front of my house. I paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk with my suitcase. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No sound of construction. No hammering, no saws, no voices of workers. The house looked exactly as it had when I left. The jacaranda petals were a purple carpet on the path, undisturbed by foot traffic. I wheeled my suitcase up the walkway. My roses by the porch were wilting, their petals browned at the edges from lack of water. A small detail, but it sent a sharp pang through my chest. I ignored it and climbed the 2 steps to my front door. I reached for the handle out of habit, but my hand stopped. The lock was different. It was a new, polished brass deadbolt installed above the original handle. The metal gleamed in the late afternoon light. My old key would be useless. I pressed the doorbell. I heard the familiar chime inside, a sound that had echoed through my life for 40 years. No footsteps approached. I pressed it again, holding it longer. This time I heard movement, slow, deliberate steps. A shadow obscured the frosted glass of the side light. The new deadbolt clicked, a solid, unfamiliar sound. The door opened, not fully, just the width of a person. Vanessa stood there. She was not dressed for renovations. She wore tailored trousers and a silk blouse. Her expression was not one of harried surprise, but of cold, prepared expectation. The sweet smile was absent. "Katarina," she said. She did not use me. "Vanessa," I gestured to my suitcase. "I have returned." She did not look at the suitcase. Her eyes stayed on my face. "Returned for what?" "To stay," I said, my voice even. "The week is over. I have come home." A faint, dismissive breath escaped her. She adjusted her stance, blocking the doorway more completely. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. You're not coming back." The words were stated as a simple fact, devoid of malice or apology. They hung in the air between us. I felt a peculiar stillness settle over me. The cold clarity from the apartment crystallized into a hard, knowing core. "I do not understand," I said, though I understood perfectly. "The renovation is finished in 1 week." "The renovation plans have evolved," she said, her tone smooth. "Ricardo and I have decided to take a different approach. The house needs new energy, a fresh start. Having you here with all your things, it complicates that vision." "My vision," I said slowly, "is to live in my home." "It's not your home anymore," Vanessa replied. Her voice was quiet, firm. "It's ours, mine and Ricardo's. We've discussed this. You agreed to leave. We've made other arrangements for you. The apartment is suitable. You should go back there." I looked past her into my living room. I could see the edge of my sofa, the same one I had chosen with Antonio. A throw pillow was out of place. "I would like to speak with my son." "Ricardo is not here. He agrees with this decision. It was a mutual one." Her gaze was unwavering. "This is difficult, I know, but it's for the best. You'll be more comfortable in a smaller, modern space. This house is too much for a woman your age to manage." I listened to her list the reasons. My age, the house's size, their vision, my comfort. The logic was a closed loop, designed to sound reasonable and final. I saw the truth beneath it, a simple, brutal theft wrapped in polite language. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. Arguing would mean accepting her premise that this was a debate. It was not. I looked down at my suitcase. I set it upright on the porch. The evening air was growing cool. I unzipped the main compartment. Vanessa watched, a slight frown creasing her brow, perhaps expecting me to pull out a nightgown to prove I intended to stay. My hands found the smooth leather of the portfolio. I lifted it out. I unzipped it and reached inside. The plastic sleeve was cool to the touch. I withdrew the single sheet of paper. I held it up not to my eyes but to hers. I turned it so the typed text faced her. I said nothing. Vanessa's eyes dropped to the paper. For a moment there was only the sound of a distant car. I watched her face. I saw the process. First, confusion at the interruption of her script. Then recognition of the form, the official seals, the dense blocks of text. Then her eyes scanned to the top, to the line of greatest importance. Her pupils dilated just slightly. The blood drained from her face, leaving her skin a pale, waxy tone against her red lipstick. All the practiced composure, the cold certainty, froze and then began to fracture. Her lips parted. She said nothing. I lowered the document. I returned it to its sleeve, to the portfolio. The sounds of the neighborhood returned, a dog barking, a neighbor's television. "The name on the deed," I said, my voice low and clear in the quiet space between us, "is Katarina Mendes. This is my house. You have changed the locks on my property. You have attempted to evict me from my own home." Vanessa found her voice. It was thinner now, a strained version of its former firmness. That's an old document," Ricardo said. "Ricardo," I interrupted, "has never seen this document. His father gave it to me, only to me. The title was never transferred. The house was never ours. It is mine." The power dynamic did not so much shift as it inverted entirely. The person blocking the doorway was no longer the gatekeeper, but the trespasser. The knowledge was a physical weight in my hands. "You will remove your new lock," I continued. "You will return all keys to me. You will remove any of your possessions you have brought into my home. You have 72 hours to do so." She stared at me. The polished, modern woman was gone. In her place was someone facing a structural flaw in her plans she had never anticipated. Fear, raw and uncalculated, flickered in her eyes. "You can't just," she began. "I can," I said. I zipped the portfolio. "The law is very clear. I suggest you consult it, or your lawyer. I will be back in 72 hours. If my property is not as I left it, I will proceed with legal action." I placed the portfolio back in my suitcase and closed it. I turned the handle. I did not look at her again. I walked down the porch steps, my suitcase rolling behind me on the path. I did not need to see her reaction. I had seen the one thing that mattered, the moment her certainty shattered. I walked to the corner and hailed another taxi. I did not give the address of the efficient apartment. I gave the address of my old friend, Louisa. It was time to move from waiting to acting. The first move had been theirs. The second, with the rustle of a single piece of paper, had been mine. The game was now in the open, and I held the only piece that mattered. The taxi pulled up to a familiar curb in a neighborhood of older, well-kept houses. Lewis's home was a 2-story structure with a wide veranda, always adorned with potted ferns and flowering vines. Light spilled from the windows, a warm yellow against the deepening twilight. I paid the driver and lifted my suitcase from the trunk. The weight of it, and of the portfolio inside, felt different now. It was no longer the weight of exile, but of ammunition. I did not ring the bell. I walked up the path, the sound of my wheels on the flagstones a soft rumble. The front door was unlocked, as it always was before 8 o'clock. I pushed it open and called out, "Louisa, it's Katarina." There was a moment of silence, then quick footsteps from the kitchen. Louisa appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on a checkered dish towel. Her face, round and lined from a lifetime of smiles, registered surprise, then immediate concern. "Keisha, what are you doing here with a suitcase? Is everything all right?" "No," I said simply. "It is not." She did not ask another question. She stepped forward, took the suitcase handle from me, and wheeled it inside. "Come to the kitchen. I just made coffee." I followed her. The kitchen was the heart of her home, warm and cluttered with the evidence of a full life. A pot of asterisk feijao simmered on the stove. The smell of garlic and onion was comforting. She gestured to the wooden table, and I sat. She placed a small china cup in front of me and filled it with black coffee from a stainless steel pot. I took a sip. The heat and bitterness grounded me. Louisa sat across from me, her hands folded on the table, waiting. Vanessa and Ricardo told me the house needed dangerous renovations. I began, my voice flat. They said I should leave for my own comfort. For a while, they put me in an apartment downtown. Lewis's eyes narrowed. She knew Vanessa. And I went back today. There are no renovations. There is a new lock on my door. Vanessa told me I am not coming back, that the house is theirs now, that I am to stay in the apartment. A sound of disgust escaped Lewis's lips. Mu Deus asterisk, that woman, and Ricardo, what did he say? He was not there. She says he agrees. I took another sip of coffee. I showed her the deed. Lewisa leaned forward. You still have it, the original. I nodded. I bent down, opened my suitcase, and retrieved the leather portfolio. I unzipped it and slid out the plastic-sleeved document. I placed it on the table between us. Lewisa did not touch it. She peered at it, her eyes scanning the official header, the notary stamps, the typed lines. Her finger hovered over the key line. Katarina Mendes, sole owner. Yes. They did not know. Ricardo never knew the details. His father handled it. Antonio always said the house was my security. He put it in my name only. After he passed, there was no reason to change it. I never thought I would need the paper as a shield against my own family. Lewisa sat back, blowing out a long breath. So, they tried to steal your house. They thought you were a foolish old woman who would not fight. They were correct about one thing, I said, folding my hands around the warm cup. I did not want to fight. I agreed to leave to keep peace for my son, but this is not a family disagreement. This is theft. I will not allow it. The determination in my voice was new, even to me. It was a clean, sharp feeling, free of the sadness that had plagued me in the sterile apartment. What will you do? Lewisa asked. I gave her 72 hours to remove her lock and her things. She will not do it. She will call Ricardo. She will try to find a lawyer to twist the situation. So I must have a lawyer first. A good one. Lewisa nodded slowly, a plan forming behind her eyes. I know someone, Dr. Almeida. He handled my brother's property dispute. He is old school, very thorough, and he does not like bullies. He will see this for what it is. Can you call him? Tomorrow morning, first thing. She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was warm and dry. You will stay here, of course. Not in that cold box they put you in. You have the guest room. The offer was not a question. It was a statement of fact. The relief that washed over me was not overwhelming, but it was deep, a quiet settling in my bones. I was not alone. Thank you, Lewisa. There is nothing to thank. This is what friends are for. She stood and went to the stove, lifting the lid on the pot of beans. Now you will eat, then you will rest. Tomorrow we make war. She said it without drama, as if stating we would go to the market. I appreciated that. This was not a melodrama. It was a practical problem requiring a practical solution. The document was the blueprint. The lawyer would be the engineer, and I would be the client, finally asserting my ownership in more than just memory. That night in Lewisa's spare room with its faded quilts and the scent of lavender in the drawers, I slept. It was not an easy sleep, but it was a real one. I was not waiting anymore. I had moved. I had shown my hand. The next moves would be legal, procedural, and deliberate. As I drifted off, I thought of the deed, sitting in its sleeve on the nightstand. It was just paper and ink. But it was also 40 years of history, of mortgage payments made from Antonio's salary, of dreams built within those walls. Vanessa saw a house, an asset. She never understood it was a testament. And now, that testament would be read in a lawyer's office, and its words would be my first and most powerful weapon. The morning light through Lewis's kitchen window was clear and ordinary. I sat at the table with a second cup of coffee, the deed and my identification documents arranged neatly before me. The 72-hour period I had given Vanessa was a formality, a courtesy she did not deserve. I did not expect a call, a key under the mat, or an apology. I expected the silence we had, which was its own form of answer. Lewisa finished her call at the counter. She turned to me, her expression businesslike. Dr. Almeida can see us at 11. He was not pleased to hear the summary. He said, and I quote, "Tell Dona Catarina to bring every paper she has ever touched." He does not appreciate wasting time. Good, I said. I gathered the papers into the portfolio. They were not just papers, they were my history. My marriage certificate, Antonio's death certificate, decades of utility bills in my name, the original purchase agreement from 1979. Each one was a thread in the fabric of my ownership. We took a taxi to an older commercial district. Dr. Almeida's office was on the third floor of a building with a marble staircase. The waiting room was quiet, furnished with dark wood and leather chairs. A serious-looking secretary nodded us toward a heavy oak door. Dr. Almeida was a man in his late 70s, with a full head of white hair and eyes that missed nothing. He did not smile. He stood, shook my hand with a firm grip, and gestured for Luisa and me to sit in the chairs facing his enormous desk. Dona Catarina, Luisa has given me the broad strokes. Now you will tell me everything from the beginning. Do not leave out any detail you consider small. I did as he asked. I spoke calmly, recounting Vanessa's initial suggestion about renovations, my son's reluctant complicity, the move to the apartment, the discovery of the new lock, and the confrontation on the porch. I did not embellish. I did not cry. I stated facts. When I finished, I placed the leather portfolio on his desk. He opened it. He examined each document with slow, methodical care. He spent several minutes on the property deed, holding it close to his eyes, tracing the registrar's number with a finger. He compared the dates on the deed to the dates on the utility bills. He asked for my ID card and studied it. Finally, he set the deed down and looked at me. His expression was severe, but there was a glint in his eye that might have been approval. This is one of the most straightforward cases of attempted illegal eviction and usurpation I have seen in years. The deed is incontestable. You are the sole owner. They have no legal basis, no claim, no right to change a single lock. A solid, unyielding relief settled in my chest. What happens now? Now we skip the 72 hours. They were a gesture from you, not a legal requirement. We proceed formally. He pulled a legal pad toward him and began writing in a quick, sharp script. We will draft a formal notification. It will state the facts. You are the owner, they are in a legal occupation. They have altered the property without consent. It will demand they vacate the premises immediately and restore the locks to their previous state. It will give them 48 hours to comply. And if they do not, Luisa asked. Dr. Almeida's pen did not stop moving. Then we escalate. We file for a judicial eviction order. With this documentation, it will be granted within days. A court officer, and if necessary, the police will escort them from the property. They will also be liable for any damages to the property and for legal costs. The notification makes the consequences very clear. He finished writing and looked up at me. This notification is a serious document. It is the first step in a legal process that will remove them from your home. There will be no more conversations on the porch. This is the law speaking. Are you prepared for that? I thought of my wilted roses. I thought of the gleam of the new lock. I thought of Vanessa's face, drained of color but still defiant. I am prepared. Good, he rang for his secretary. Maria, type this up immediately. Use the standard template but insert these specifics. I want it ready for signature within the hour. While we waited, Dr. Almeida asked me more questions. Did I have photos of the house's interior? Did I know if they had moved any of my possessions? Had they started any actual renovations? I answered as best I could. I had no recent photos. My possessions, as far as I knew, were where I left them. There was no sign of renovation work. Their plan was likely to move your things to storage gradually under the guise of renovation, he mused. To establish a new status quo, a common tactic. They underestimated your preparedness. The secretary returned with the typed document. Dr. Almeida reviewed it, made 2 small corrections, and had her print the final version. He slid it across the desk to me. It was 2 pages long, dense with formal language. My name and the property address were listed as the claimant and the location. Vanessa's and Ricardo's names were listed as the occupants. The demands were clear and unequivocal. Read it carefully, he instructed. I did. The words were cold and powerful. They transformed my personal betrayal into a legal violation. They removed emotion and replaced it with statute. I took the pen he offered and signed at the bottom with my steady, practiced signature. Katarina Mendes. How do they receive this? I asked. It will be delivered by a court officer. It is a formal service. They cannot claim they did not receive it. There will be a record. He took the signed document. I will have it processed this afternoon. Delivery will likely be tomorrow morning. You should stay away from the property until this is resolved. Do not engage with them. All communication must come through this office. Is that understood? Yes. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Dona Katarina, you have done the correct thing. Property rights are the foundation of civil society. Do not feel a moment of guilt. They brought this upon themselves. Luisa and I left the office. The morning sun was higher now, warming the street. We walked in silence for a block before Luisa looped her arm through mine. So, how do you feel? I considered the question. I did not feel triumphant. I felt focused. The vague, sickening worry had been replaced by a clear path forward. The law was a mechanism, and we had just engaged its gears. I feel, I said, that I am no longer a victim of a family problem. I am a plaintiff in a legal case. It is a cleaner feeling. Luisa squeezed my arm. Good. Let the machinery do its work. You have given them more than enough chances. We returned to her house. The ordinary tasks of the day awaited, lunch to make, a house to tend. But the atmosphere had shifted. I was not hiding or waiting. I was, for the first time since Antonio died, actively and formally defending what was mine. The next move was no longer mine to make. It was the law. And I knew with cold certainty that the law was on my side. The document had set the wheel in motion. Now it would turn. The formal notification was sent. Dr. Almeida's secretary confirmed it had been delivered to the court officer for service. The machinery was in motion. I spent the next day in a state of suspended quiet at Luisa's house. We did not speak of it. We organized a closet. We prepared a large pot of soup. The ordinary work of hands was a useful anchor. The call came in the early evening. Luisa's landline rang, its trills sharp in the quiet living room. She answered in the kitchen. After a moment, she came to the doorway, the cordless phone in her hand. Her expression was unreadable. It's for you. It's Ricardo. I put down the linen napkin I was folding. I felt a strange calm. I had expected this. The court officer would have delivered the paper. Vanessa would have reacted. Ricardo would now be deployed. I took the phone from Luisa. She retreated to the kitchen, giving me privacy that felt both necessary and isolating. Me. His voice was strained, a tight wire of anxiety. Ricardo. Me, what is this? A court officer was just here. He gave us a legal notice. It says you're trying to evict us, that you own the house. Vanessa is hysterical. She says you showed her some old paper and threatened her. What is happening? I listened to the rush of his words. The narrative was already twisted. I was the aggressor. Vanessa was the victim. He was the confused intermediary. I let the silence stretch for a moment after he finished, allowing his own echo to sit with him. The paper is the original property deed, I said, my voice level. The house is in my name, only my name. It has always been that way. Your father arranged it. That can't be right. He would have told me. He would have left it to both of us. He left you many things, Ricardo. He left you his character, his education, his love. He left me the house. It was my security. He told me, not you. The document is legal and incontestable. Dr. Almeida has confirmed this. Dr. Almeida? You have a lawyer. The shock in his voice was genuine. The idea that I would engage a lawyer, that I would move in a world of formal documents, was beyond his comprehension of me. I do. He is handling the illegal eviction. Illegal eviction? Me, we didn't evict you. You agreed to leave. We were renovating for you. His tone was pleading now, desperate to return to the original, false story. There are no renovations, Ricardo. There is only a new lock on my door. Your wife told me I am not to return. She told me the house is yours now. She told me to stay in the apartment you chose. That is the definition of an eviction. The fact that I initially agreed under false pretenses does not make it legal. It makes it fraudulent. He was silent. I could hear his breathing, shallow and quick. I could imagine him, standing in the living room of my house, the formal notice in his hand, Vanessa's version of events collapsing under the weight of legal language. She said it was for the best, that you'd be happier, that the house was too much. She said many things. The law deals in facts, not intentions. The fact is that I am the owner. The fact is that you are occupying my property without my consent and have barred my entry. The notice explains the required actions and the consequences of inaction. Consequences, he whispered. If you do not vacate and restore the property, the court will order your removal. The police may be involved. You will be liable for damages and legal costs. I repeated Dr. Almeida's words precisely. They were no longer a lawyer's predictions. They were my statements of fact. Me, please, we're family. Can't we talk about this? Can't you come over? We can fix this. The word family felt hollow, a relic. There is nothing to fix, Ricardo. The law is clear. My lawyer has advised no further direct contact. All communication must go through his office. You have the notice. It explains everything you need to do. You're really doing this? His voice broke. It was the sound of a man realizing the ground beneath him is not solid, but a trapdoor. You're really going to throw your own son out of his home. The manipulation, intentional or not, was clumsy. It ignited a spark of cold anger in me, but my voice remained steady. You are not being thrown out of your home. You are being asked to leave mine. You made a choice, Ricardo. You chose to listen to her plan. You chose not to ask me for the truth of the ownership. You chose to let her change the locks. You stood by while she told your mother she could not return. These were your choices. Now you have another choice. Comply with the law voluntarily or have the law compel you. I suggest you choose wisely. The line was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, all the frantic energy was gone. He sounded drained, old. She never mentioned a deed. She said you had agreed to transfer the title to us, as an early inheritance. She said you were being difficult about the details. I closed my eyes. The lie was so vast, so audacious. And he had believed it because it was easier than confronting his wife, because it fit a narrative where he was not at fault. She lied to you, son, and you chose to believe her. The document never left my possession. I will not discuss this further on the phone. You have the information you need. I did not wait for his reply. Goodbye, Ricardo. I pressed the button to end the call. My hand was steady. I placed the phone on the side table. The living room was very quiet. I could hear Luisa slowly stirring the soup in the kitchen, giving me time. I felt no triumph. I felt a profound, weary sadness. The conversation had severed the last fragile thread of the story we had both pretended was true. There was no misunderstanding. There was deceit and there was complicity. The legal path was now the only path forward. My son was on the other side of it, not as a monster, but as a weak man who had made a catastrophic error in judgment. That, in its way, was harder to face. The anger toward Vanessa was clean and sharp. The disappointment in Ricardo was a dull, heavy ache. Luisa appeared in the doorway. She held a ladle. Well, he knows the truth now, I said. Or at least he can no longer avoid it. The choice is his. She nodded, understanding the complexity in those words. Soup is ready. You need to eat. I followed her to the kitchen. The warmth and the smell of food were real, tangible things in a world that had just become severely abstract. The family was broken, but the house was still mine. And for now, that was the only fact I could afford to hold on to. The emotional reckoning would have to wait. The legal one was proceeding on schedule. The morning after the phone call with Ricardo arrived with a flat, gray sky. The heavy sadness had condensed overnight into a sharper, more practical resolve. The emotional confrontation was over. Now, only the practical steps mattered. Luisa drove me back to Dr. Almeida's office. The silence in the car was comfortable, both of us understanding that words were unnecessary. We were shown into his office immediately. Dr. Almeida did not offer pleasantries. He gestured to the chairs and opened a file on his desk. The notification was served yesterday at 4:17 p.m. I have the officer's return of service here. They acknowledged receipt. Have they contacted you? I asked. They have not. The 48-hour clock in the notice is ticking. I do not expect them to comply. People in such situations rarely do. They cling to the hope that the problem will disappear or that you will relent. He looked at me over his glasses. You will not relent. It was not a question. I will not. Good. Therefore, we proceed to the next phase without delay. We file for a judicial eviction order. Given the clarity of the documentation, I have already drafted the petition. He slid a thick document across the desk. This is what will be submitted to the court. It outlines the history of ownership, the fraudulent inducement to vacate, the illegal alteration of the locks, and their refusal to remedy the situation after formal notice. I looked at the dense pages. My name appeared again and again. How long will this take? With a straightforward case like this, the judge can issue an order on an expedited basis. We are not arguing nuances of law. We are presenting facts. The law regarding property rights and illegal occupation is very clear. I expect to have the order within 3 to 5 business days after filing. And then the court order is served. It commands them to vacate within a specified period, typically 72 hours. If they do not, we request a writ of possession. A court officer, accompanied by the police if there is concern about resistance, will physically remove them from the property and restore possession to you. The process was a series of steps, each more forceful than the last. It felt impersonal and powerful. And my things inside. The order will include provisions for you to be present to secure your belongings. They will be allowed to remove their personal items. Any of your possessions they have damaged or disposed of will become a matter for a separate damages claim. He leaned back in his chair. Dona Katarina, you must understand your position. You are not the aggressor here. You are the victim of a crime, usurpation. The law is designed to restore you to your property as swiftly as possible. There is no moral ambiguity in this process. I nodded. The clarity was what I needed. The messy, painful family betrayal was being translated into the clean, procedural language of the court. It was a relief. There is one other matter, Dr. Almeida said, his tone shifting slightly. Your son, Ricardo, he is listed as an occupant. The law will treat him the same as his wife. He will be evicted. There is no separate consideration for family members in a case of illegal occupation. Are you prepared for that? I had considered this during the long, quiet night. The phone call had been the preparation. I am prepared. He made a choice. He is an adult. The law does not see a son. It sees an occupant without a right to be there. Dr. Almeida gave a single, slow nod. Correct. Sentiment cannot interfere with property rights. It is a hard principle, but a necessary one. He gathered the papers. I will file this today. You should prepare yourself. The next time you go to your house, it will likely be with a court officer. Do not attempt to go before then. It could complicate matters. I understand. I will call you as soon as I have news from the court. In the meantime, if they contact you, I will refer them to you, I finished. Exactly. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. You are handling this with admirable fortitude. Many in your position would be paralyzed by emotion. It is a strength to see the situation for what it is. Luisa and I left the office. The gray sky had not cleared. As we walked to the car, she spoke. He is right, you know, it is a strength. It does not feel like strength, I said honestly. It feels like necessity. When there is no other path, you walk the one in front of you. We drove back to her house. The legal machinery was now fully engaged. The petition was filed. The judge would review it. An order would be issued. It was a sequence of events set in motion, impersonal and inevitable. My role was now one of waiting again, but this was a different kind of wait. It was the wait of a plaintiff, not a victim. I was no longer hopping for a change of heart. I was awaiting the execution of a legal judgment. That afternoon, I asked Luisa for a notebook and a pen. I began to make a list. It was a list of the rooms in my house, and from memory, I wrote down the significant items in each. The walnut dresser from Antonio's father, the silver service from my wedding, the set of china painted with blue flowers, a gift from my mother, the photograph albums in the bottom drawer of the living room cabinet. I did not list everything, only the things that held memory or value. It was an inventory for myself, a way to prepare for the day I would walk back in. It was also a way to reaffirm in my own mind what was at stake. It was not just a structure, it was a collection of a life. The list filled several pages. Writing each item was a small act of reclamation. By naming my possessions, I was asserting my ownership in a private, methodical way. It grounded the abstract legal process in tangible reality. The law would give me back the house. This list reminded me of what the house contained. I closed the notebook. The wait continued, but I was no longer passive. I was prepared. The legal ground was firm, and I was standing on it. Dr. Almeida's call came 4 days later, in the mid-morning. Luisa handed me the phone with a silent look of expectation. Dona Catarina, the eviction order has been granted. The judge signed it this morning. It gives them 72 hours to vacate voluntarily. I absorbed the information, and if they do not, then we execute the order. A court officer will supervise their removal. The order is being sent to the officer for service today. They will receive it by the end of the day. I see. This is a significant step, he said, his voice carrying a note of finality. The court has now formally recognized your right and their wrong. The next time you approach the house, it will be to take possession. After the call, I sat at Luisa's kitchen table. The news was what I had expected, yet hearing it made the reality more concrete. The law had spoken. The next move was theirs, but the conclusion was now inevitable. Luisa, practical as ever, suggested we take a walk. Some air, you've been inside too much. We walked the familiar streets of her neighborhood, but my mind was elsewhere. As we rounded a corner, a thought occurred to me. Luisa, do you know Dona Silvia on my street? The one with the yellow house, 2 doors down from mine. Of course, we talk at the market sometimes. Would she call you if she saw something noteworthy happening at my house today? A slow smile spread on Luisa's face. I believe she would. Let's go home. I will make the call. An hour later, Luisa's phone rang. She listened, said, I see, thank you, Sylvia, and hung up. She turned to me. The court officer arrived 10 minutes ago, a formal car. He knocked. Vanessa answered. He handed her the papers. She took them. He left. Sylvia was watering her plants. She saw everything. How did Vanessa look? According to Sylvia, she was pale. She stood in the doorway for a long time after the car left, just staring at the papers. Then she closed the door very slowly. I pictured the scene. The bright afternoon sun on the porch, the official envelope, the uniformed officer. There would be no mistaking the nature of the visit. The neighbors would know. The veneer of a simple renovation or a family arrangement was now publicly shattered. The following day, Luisa's phone became a quiet conduit of information. Dona Silvia called again in the afternoon. Her voice, whispered over the line as Luisa held the receiver between us, was full of contained drama. Luisa, it's happening. People are talking. Maria from number 15 saw Ricardo carrying suitcases to their car this morning. He looked like a ghost. And Vanessa, she left an hour ago, slammed the car door so hard the sound echoed down the street. She hasn't come back. And the house? Luisa asked. Quiet, the curtains are drawn, it looks ashamed. Later, another neighbor, Senor Batista from the corner store, called Luisa. He had heard from his wife, who had spoken to the mail carrier. The mail carrier had been asked by Vanessa yesterday, before the officer came, if there was any mail for Catarina Mendes. He had said no. All mail was being held at the post office for lack of forwarding instructions. Senor Batista said the story was now all over the *Padaria*. The consensus was one of grim disapproval. Trying to put an elderly mother out of her own home was one thing. Being served with a court order for it was another. It crossed a line. I listened to these reports without comment. This was the unwritten rule Dr. Almeida had alluded to, the social weight of community opinion. Vanessa had cared about appearances, about projecting an image of modern, successful living. Now, the appearance was of a woman who had been caught in a cruel and illegal act, her respectability stripped away by an official document. The court order was a legal tool, but its delivery was a social event. It branded her actions publicly. I felt no pleasure in her humiliation. I felt a detached sense of justice. The consequences of her actions were no longer confined to our private conflict. They were now a matter of public record and neighborhood gossip. Her reputation, which she had cultivated so carefully, was damaged. This was not my primary goal. Reclaiming my home was, but it was an inevitable byproduct. She had chosen to stage her theft in the open, assuming no one would challenge her narrative. She was wrong. That evening, Louisa and I sat in her living room. The reports had ceased. The street, it seemed, was quiet. "They are packing," Louisa said. "They are following the order." "It appears so. Are you ready to go back?" I thought of the list in my notebook, of the silent rooms, of the new lock that would need to be removed. I thought of the wilted roses. I am ready to see what is left. The 72-hour clock was ticking down. The legal pressure was absolute. The social pressure had been applied. The combination was proving effective. The facade had not just cracked, it had collapsed under the weight of official paper and watching eyes. My victory, when it came, would not be celebrated in the street. It would be a quiet reclamation. But it was satisfying to know that the truth was now the property of the entire neighborhood, not just a secret hidden behind a new lock. Vanessa's eviction had begun not with a physical removal, but with this public, undeniable unveiling of her deceit. The law had visited, and everyone had seen it. The 72 hours specified in the eviction order expired at noon. At 12:05, Dr. Almeida called. "The court officer reports they have vacated the premises. The keys have been left with the officer. He is there now with a locksmith to secure the property for you. He will meet you there at 2 o'clock to hand over possession." I thanked him and hung up. I looked at Louisa. "It's time." She drove me in silence. As we turned onto my street, I saw the familiar shapes of the houses, the jacaranda tree. My house came into view. It looked the same, yet utterly different. The garden was parched, the roses now brittle brown skeletons. The curtains in the front window were drawn tight. A marked police car was parked discreetly at the curb, and a locksmith's van was in the driveway. The presence of official vehicles made the scene look serious, final. We parked behind the police car. A uniformed officer and a man in a suit, the court officer, stood on the porch with a locksmith who was working on the door. The new brass deadbolt was already gone, lying on the porch swing. The locksmith was installing a modern, sturdy lock. Neighbors were visible in peripheral windows, observing without appearing to watch. The court officer, a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor, stepped forward as we approached. "Dona Catarina Mendes." "Yes." "I am Officer Nascimento. The occupants vacated approximately 1 hour ago. We are replacing the locks as per the court order. You will be given 2 sets of keys." He held up a plain envelope. "The previous occupants left these inside. They are the keys they had made." I took the envelope. It felt light. I did not open it. The locksmith finished his work, tested the new lock, and handed me 2 shiny silver keys. They were cool in my palm. "All set, Dona. It's a good lock." Officer Nascimento produced a clipboard with a document. "This is the writ of possession. Your signature here acknowledges that you have retaken physical control of the property as of this date and time. The officer and I are here as witnesses." I signed where he indicated. The pen scratched on the paper. He handed me a copy. "It is done. The property is legally and physically yours again. Do you wish us to accompany you inside for an initial inspection?" "Yes, please." Officer Nascimento nodded to the police officer, who stepped forward. I slid the new key into the lock. It turned smoothly with a solid, satisfying clunk. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. It was not my smell. It was Vanessa's perfume, a cloying floral scent, overlaid with the smell of packing dust and emptiness. The living room was in a state of disarray. My furniture was all there, the sofa, the armchairs, the cabinets, but it had been pushed aside as if to make space for boxes. Several large cardboard boxes sat in the center of the room, half filled with linens and kitchen items that were clearly Vanessa's modern, minimalist things. My blue china, my embroidered tablecloth were not touched. I walked slowly into the center of the room. I ran my hand over the back of my sofa. The fabric was familiar. I looked at the walls. They were the same color. There were no paint samples, no drop cloths. The lie was visible in the undisturbed plaster. A sound came from the hallway. I turned. Vanessa emerged from the direction of the bedrooms, carrying a stack of sweaters. She stopped when she saw our group. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with red, but her expression was a mask of tight fury. She was dressed in casual clothes, her hair pulled back. She looked ordinary and defeated. Officer Nascimento stepped forward slightly. You are required to complete the removal of your personal items. You have until the end of today. After that, any items remaining will be considered abandoned. Vanessa did not look at him. Her eyes were fixed on me. Happy now, she spat, the words low and venomous. I did not answer her question. I looked at the boxes. You will take only what belongs to you. You will not touch anything that is mine. The officers will supervise. I know what's mine, she said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. Do you? I asked, my tone flat. I walked past her toward the kitchen. She took a step back as if my proximity was physically repellent. The kitchen was mostly intact. My pots hung on their rack. My dishes were in the cupboard. A single box on the table held Vanessa's expensive coffee machine and a set of designer knives. I continued my walk, the two officers a respectful few steps behind me. I checked the dining room, the bathroom. Everything of mine seemed present. The violation was not in theft, but in occupation, in the presumption. I saved my bedroom for last. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. The room was as I had left it, but not. My bed was made, but with different linens, Vanessa's stark white sheets. My dresser was cleared of my jewelry box, my brush set. They were sitting on the bed, carefully placed, as if someone had gathered them to be packed, but then thought better of it. My clothes still hung in the closet, but pushed to one side. Vanessa's clothes had occupied the other half. They were now gone, leaving empty hangers. I stood in the doorway. This was the deepest violation. This personal space, shared without my consent. The officers waited in the hall. I heard footsteps behind me. Vanessa stood there, holding an empty box. I didn't touch your precious things, she said, her voice a harsh whisper. See, they're all here, your dusty old relics. I turned to face her. The police officer shifted his weight, attentive. This was never about things, I said, my voice low so only she could hear. It was about respect. You never had any. You saw a house. I saw a home. You saw an old woman. I am the owner. You made a calculation based on greed and disrespect. It was a wrong calculation. Her jaw tightened. For a second, I saw something behind the fury, a flicker of something like understanding, or perhaps just the shock of facing the consequence she had never believed would come. He chose you, you know, she said bitterly. Your son. He left this morning. He took a bag and left. He chose his mother over his wife. I absorbed this information without reaction. He chose the truth over a lie. That is not the same thing. She had no answer to that. The bitterness in her eyes solidified into a hard, lonely resentment. She pushed past me into the room, shoved the remaining sweaters from a drawer into her box, and walked out without another word. I stayed in my bedroom. I listened to the sounds of her final movements, the scrape of boxes, the closing of car doors. After a while, Officer Nascimento appeared at the door. She has left. The property is clear. We will leave you now. The matter is closed. I thanked them. They left, closing the front door gently behind them. The sudden silence was immense. It was my silence again. The lock on the door was mine. The walls were mine. The lingering, unwanted scent in the air would fade. I walked to the window in my bedroom and pushed the curtains wide open. Light flooded in, illuminating the dust motes stirred up by the day's activity. I looked at my reflection in the glass, a woman with elegantly styled gray hair standing in her reclaimed bedroom. The victory was quiet and it was complete, but the house felt hollow, waiting to be filled again with the life that had been interrupted. That would be the next task. For now, I simply stood there, listening to the silence of what was once more, irrevocably, my own. The silence after the official cars left was profound. It was not a peaceful silence, but a waiting one, thick with the residue of conflict. I stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by the displaced furniture and the half-empty boxes Vanessa had abandoned in her rush. The first task was to move. I began pushing the sofa back to its proper place against the wall. The physical effort was a relief, a way to engage my body while my mind processed the hollow victory. I had just finished repositioning the armchair when a soft knock echoed through the house. I froze. It was not the firm rap of an official, nor the aggressive knock of Vanessa. It was hesitant. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Ricardo stood on the porch. He looked diminished. He wore a simple shirt and trousers, and he carried a single duffel bag at his feet. His face was pale, his eyes shadowed. He looked like a man who had not slept. I unlocked the door and opened it. We looked at each other. The last time we had spoken was on the phone, my words cold with legal fact. Now there was only the quiet between us. "Me," he said, his voice rough. "Ricardo, may I come in?" I stepped back, allowing him entry. He picked up his bag and crossed the threshold. He looked around the living room at the evidence of the rushed departure and flinched. He placed his bag carefully by the door, as if unsure he had the right to bring it further. "I'm alone," he said. "She's gone. I left. I'm staying at a hotel." I nodded, waiting. This was his moment to speak. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of exhaustion I remembered from his childhood. "I need you to know, I need you to understand what happened, from my side, not to excuse it. There is no excuse, but so you know." "I am listening," I said. I did not offer him a seat. We both remained standing in the unsettled room. He took a deep breath. "She started talking about the house over a year ago, how it was a waste, such a big place for one person, how it needed modernizing. She framed it as concern for you. She said you were getting older, that the stairs were a risk, that you'd be happier in a smaller, newer place. I believed her, or I wanted to believe her. It was easier than arguing." He paused, looking at the floor. "Then she said she'd spoken to a lawyer friend, that you had agreed in principle to transfer the title to us as an early inheritance, that the paperwork was just a formality. She said you were being slow about signing, sentimental. She said the renovation was a way to gently push the process, to get you used to the idea of moving. She made it sound logical, inevitable." I listened, my face impassive. The lie was so comprehensive. It required a sustained deceit over months. It required him to ignore his own instincts. "When you left for the apartment, I felt uneasy. But she was so cheerful, so full of plans. I buried the feeling when you came back and showed her the deed." He shook his head. "I was at work. She called me hysterical, saying you had threatened her with a fake document. I didn't know what to believe. I was confused. Then the legal notice came. I confronted her. I demanded to see the proof of the transfer she always talked about. She couldn't produce it. She started crying, saying she'd misunderstood, that she'd done it all for us, for our future. That's when I knew." He looked at me, his eyes full of a raw pain. I knew she had lied, not just a small lie, a massive, calculated lie. To you, to me, to get the house. And I had let her. I had been so passive, so willing to believe the easy story, that I let her do this to you, to us. His words hung in the air. The confession was complete. "The court order was the final truth," he continued. "I packed my things this morning. I told her it was over. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't stay in this house another minute, knowing how we came to be in it. I left before she did." He fell silent, waiting for my judgment. I looked at my son, this man I had raised. I saw the shame and the regret. The anger I had harbored toward him softened, not into absolution, but into a painful clarity. He was not evil. He was weak. His weakness had been the conduit for the evil of another. That was its own kind of betrayal. "You asked me on the phone if I was throwing my son out of his home," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "You were never thrown out, Ricardo. You walked out. You walked out the moment you chose her fiction over your mother's reality. You walked out when you allowed her to change the locks. A home is built on trust. You broke that trust. Not with malice, but with neglect. That is sometimes worse." He nodded, a tear tracing a path down his cheek. He did not wipe it away. "I know, I am so sorry, me. More sorry than I can ever say. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see all of it." "Forgiveness is not a transaction," I said. "It is a process. It starts with truth. You have told the truth today. That is a beginning." Is there a place for me to begin?" he asked, the hope in his voice fragile. I looked around my reclaimed living room. It was empty of his presence and of the woman he had chosen. It was full of memory and now of a difficult, hard-won piece. "This is my home," I said. "You are my son, you may visit, but you cannot live here, not now. The trust that would allow that is broken. It must be rebuilt. And that will take time and action, not just words." He absorbed this, and I saw a flicker of understanding. I was not casting him out. I was stating the new, fragile reality. He had to build his own life now, one based on truth. "I understand," he whispered. "Thank you." An impulse moved me. "Would you like a coffee?" He looked up surprised. "Yes, please." I led the way to the kitchen. I filled my old kettle with water. I took down 2 of my simple white cups. The ordinary ritual in the heart of the home felt significant. We did not speak while the water boiled. I made the coffee, strong and black, the way he liked it. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he had done his homework as a boy. We drank in silence for a moment. "What will you do now?" I asked. "I will find an apartment. I will focus on my work. I will learn to be alone with what I've done." He looked at me. "And I would like, if you allow it, to visit, to help. With the garden, the roses, they look bad." "They need water," I agreed. "That would be a help." It was a small offer, a concrete action. It was a start. He finished his coffee and stood. "I should go. Let you settle back in." I walked him to the door. He picked up his duffel bag. He hesitated, then leaned forward and kissed my cheek. The gesture was tentative, filled with the fear of rejection. I did not pull away. "I will call you tomorrow," he said. "I will be here." He left, closing the door softly behind him. I turned the new lock. The sound was final but not absolute. The house was mine again. The relationship with my son was damaged but not destroyed. There was a path forward, narrow and uncertain, but it existed. The vengeance was complete. The reconciliation had just begun. I returned to the living room and began unpacking the first box, ready to fill the silence with the life that belonged there. The days that followed were methodical. The first task was the final, definitive lock. The one installed by the court was functional, but it was a temporary measure, a symbol of legal reclamation. I wanted my own choice. I called a different locksmith, one Antonio had used for years. I selected a solid, well-made deadbolt, nothing ornate. I watched as he removed the court-installed lock and put mine in its place. When he handed me the 2 new keys, they felt different. They were not a reaction. They were a decision. With the house physically secured, I began the work of reclamation in earnest. I started with Vanessa's abandoned boxes. I did not open them. I carried them one by one to the porch. I called a charity pickup service and scheduled a collection. I did not inventory the contents. They were not my concern. Next, I stripped the bed in my room. I removed her white linens and placed them in a trash bag. From the linen closet, I took out my own set, the floral pattern faded from years of washing. I made the bed with familiar motions. I returned my jewelry box and silver brush set to the dresser. I rearranged the closet, pushing my clothes back to occupy the entire space. Each action was a deliberate erasure. The living room required more effort. I emptied the room of all furniture and rolled up the rug. I spent a day cleaning every surface, wiping away not just dust, but the psychic residue of the occupation. I washed the windows until they shone. When everything was clean, I put each piece of furniture back in its exact, remembered place. The room did not just look like mine again, it felt like mine. Ricardo called, as he had said he would. His voice was quiet, respectful. He asked if he could come by on Saturday to work on the garden. I agreed. He arrived on time, carrying a bag of gardening tools and new bags of soil. He worked in silence for the first hour, clearing the dead leaves and branches, carefully pruning the rose bushes that could be saved. I brought him a glass of water and stood watching. "They might come back," he said, not looking up from the soil he was turning. "The roots are still good, they just need care." "I know," I said. He continued his work. It was a practical contribution, an act of service that required no deep conversation. It was the right kind of start. A week after my return, I called Louisa. "I would like to have you and a few others over, for coffee, not a party, just to sit in the living room." She understood. "Of course, this Sunday afternoon." "Yes." On Sunday, I baked a simple pound cake, an old recipe that required little thought. I made a large pot of coffee. At 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. It was Luisa, followed by Dona Silvia from down the street and my old friend Eliana from the choir. They entered, each carrying a small offering, a box of candies, a cutting from a plant. They did not speak of what had happened in excessive detail. They simply said, "It's good to see you back, Katarina, and the house looks well." We sat in the clean, sunlit living room. We drank coffee and ate cake. We talked about ordinary things, a recipe for okra, an upcoming community fair, the unreliable bus schedule. The conversation was light, filled with the easy rhythm of long familiarity. Their presence in the room was a quiet, powerful benediction. It reaffirmed my place in the community, a place that had been temporarily, but not permanently, shaken. As the afternoon light began to soften, Ricardo arrived. He had said he would stop by to check on the roses. He seemed hesitant to see the cars outside, but he came to the door. I let him in. He nodded respectfully to the women, who greeted him with polite, reserved warmth. He did not stay in the living room. He went straight through to the back garden to inspect his work. Luisa watched him go, then looked at me. "He is trying." "He is," I agreed. "It is a long road." When my friends left, each hugging me at the door, the house felt different. It was no longer just a reclaimed fortress. It was a home that had hosted life again. The silence that remained was a comfortable one. I went to the garden. Ricardo was watering the newly planted soil around the rose bushes. "They should recover," he said. "Thank you for your help." He nodded. "I should go. I have an appointment to look at an apartment." "Good luck," I said. He left and I was alone once more. I walked through each room of the house. I touched the back of the sofa, the kitchen table, the frame of my bedroom door. Everything was in its place. The deed was back in its portfolio, filed away in my desk drawer. Its work was done. As evening fell, I took my keys from the hook by the door. I held the new one in my palm, feeling its precise edges. It was not a symbol of conflict, but of quiet authority. I had not won a battle through shouting or cruelty. I had won by knowing what was mine and by using the tools available to me: the law, the truth, the support of friends, my own patience. I looked out the kitchen window at the garden, where the first hints of green were promising a return. The house was silent, but it was a silence I owned. The future was not something to be feared or orchestrated by others. It was simply the next day, and the next, in the home that was and would always be my own. The vengeance was complete, but more importantly, the peace was restored. It was a harder, more aware peace, but it was genuine. I turned off the lights and went upstairs, the sound of my own footsteps the only sound in the house. It was enough.